All right. So here we are. Real Tart. Where's that come from? So round about, honestly, I'm not joking. It's about 25 years ago. So before a lot of you were born, I suspect, I had a blog called Real Tart. I didn't really know what to do with it initially. I just wanted to do a blog because I like talking, and in that particular instance, writing, obviously. So what I thought I would do is be angry young man. That was the first thing. I was young then, or younger. But then also I tried a bit of humor as well and stories about my life. And the one that really took off and was really popular were kind of stories about my life, really, and also what was happening. Things that happened on particular days, little stories, vignettes, you might say. Anyway, it became really, really popular, and a lot of people on there. I reckon I had about 20,000 people at one stage. It's unbelievable. Then what happened was I was doing that partly when I was freelancing. I'm a journalist, as some of you know, and I had a bit of time on my hands. But then I got another full-time job, and I had to put the blog on the back burner. And a little time after that, so I kind of just parked it, right? Didn't do anything with it. A little time after that, I happened to be reading some other blog somewhere else, and there was this guy, and he was a Canadian. I knew him because he was one who used to comment on my blog quite often and say how he liked it, and he was always sitting there in the evenings waiting for the next episode to come up and all this sort of stuff. And anyway, I read this story he was recounting, and he was pretty depressed, right? He was down, and he said that he came along every day, every evening, with a bottle of wine. Probably that wouldn't have helped the depression, but anyway, and sat down and read my stuff and had a good laugh. And it was one of the things that had kept him from basically doing away with himself. And I told my wife, and she said, "Oh, you can't stop doing that blog." I said, "I haven't got time to do it." So I'm guessing he probably isn't with us anymore, which is a shame. I'm sorry. I feel a bit guilty about it, but what can you do? Anyway, I thought what I'd do is I'd update the blog, really, and come on here. You wouldn't believe the amount of trouble I've had trying to get on YouTube. Podcasting I've looked at. I've had so many issues with that as well. It seems really difficult. I'm sure some of you will think I'm just a grumpy old git. Anyway, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get on here regular, and maybe somebody will watch it one day, apart from me. And I'm going to talk about things that have happened. Anyway, let me give you a little bit of background, a little bit of information. I've mentioned before, I'm a journalist. I've been a journo all my life, since I was 18 anyway. And written a few books. They haven't been very successful, to be perfectly frank with you, but I might go over a bit of those. One thing I did, though, back some years ago, I wrote a book called Gone. I wrote it for my two sons. They were 3 and 5, I think, at the time. And I decided to do it so that they could have some questions to, not questions, so they could have some answers to questions they're likely to ask as they grow up. Because what I found is when my mum and my dad passed away, there were questions I hadn't asked. There were things I wanted to know, and I just couldn't find out. So I thought I'd write this book, and I thought it'd tell them everything. And it started off with when I was born. I was born in Middlesbrough, in the north of England. And when I was born, it started to snow. That's honestly true. It was in February. I know you thought I was going to say it was summertime. No, it wasn't that bizarre. It was in February. But my dad apparently spent quite a long time looking in my luxurious hair at that time, which was blonde, like many English children, for the 360s. And apparently couldn't find them. He always used to bring it up, parties and get-togethers and things like that. It was a source of great merriment to him. It really was. And so that was that. Then we moved to the Midlands, near where my grandparents lived, really. So we saw them a lot, which is brilliant. It was really good. My granddad, he used to have an afternoon nap. When I was a kid, I used to get really annoyed about this. We used to go over there on the weekends. I used to get really fed up because we'd be told to be quiet, there were 4 of us in the family, me, my brother, and 2 sisters. And we used to go there and run around the garden, make a load of noise. So Granddad's having a nap. Oh, it was so annoying. And we had to be quiet. We couldn't do too much. We had to sit down quietly. Nowadays, I actually think the nap is a good thing. So maybe it's just getting older, isn't it, I suppose? Anyway, when I was 3, I tripped when I was running along on the pavement outside the house and saw blood for the first time because I bashed my nose, right? Then I realized after a while that this was mine. And I thought, how weird is that? I remember it. It's probably my first real memory. I thought, what on earth is that? And it was blood. How bizarre is that? When I was about 7 or 8, I think, I set fire to my dad's Vespa. This was a scooter. Well, you know Vespas, right? They're quite a cult thing still now, aren't they? They weren't cult back then, right? They were for people who couldn't afford to buy a car, which he couldn't. He was a teacher, and my mum was a teacher as well. They didn't have a lot of money, and 4 kids to feed and all that stuff. So he had a scooter. He had it in a shed. It was a wooden shed, bottom of the garden. And I don't know why, but I managed. What I did was I got some paper, and I stuffed it in the pannier. So, well, not pannier. I stuffed it under the seat. The seat would come up, and there's storage space under there. So I stuffed it with paper, and then I set fire to it, as you do. And then I looked at it. I watched it as it caught fire, and the smoke started coming out, and I got to get out of the shed. And I stood there, and I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? And there's more and more smoke coming out. I went and got my dad. I said, Dad, I've got something. You come and have a look. Come and have a look. We came out. By this time, the shed was well on fire, right? There was nothing he could do about it at all. Nothing I could do. We just stood there. The fuel tank of the Vespa exploded. It came out through the side of the shed, through the window. We both ducked. It flew over our heads into next door's garden and caused quite a fire over there. They had to call the fire brigade eventually. He looked at me, my dad. I looked at him. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. And I think he felt the same as well. He didn't have words for it. He just didn't have words. I guess if that happened now, I'd probably be sent away somewhere, wouldn't I? Committed, But no, it was all part of growing up. So that was that. Anyway, look, that will do me for the moment because I just want to see how this sort of works out. You got any comments, get in touch. I'm going to try and get on here every day now. And I'll tell you a bit more about what I'm doing these days and all that sort of stuff. When I get on to the next, look, one of the other reasons for doing it, no, I'll tell you about that tomorrow. All right. Thank you for watching, and have a good evening, afternoon, or morning, depending on where you are in the world.